I'm going to go ahead and begin our webinar for how to study for a 5 on the AP Biology exam. Yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So starting off with our very basic info, the standard administration for the test this year takes place on Wednesday, May 11th. Hopefully if you are not doing a standard administration test, you already know when you are taking yours. Most of you will be taking it on this day at this time. And hopefully you know the basics of what you're getting into. This test has 2 sections, multiple choice and free response. There are 60 questions in the multiple choice. That makes up 50% of your score, and you have about an hour and a half. Not about, you have an hour and a half. And the free response section is an hour and 30 minutes for 6 questions, which makes up 50% of your score. The test has been updated a number of times since I took it back in 2005. Oh my goodness. The major updates happened in 2013 and 2020. So the content on the exam changed significantly in 2013 to be a little bit more narrow and more conceptually driven and less memorization. There's still a lot like you've got to have in your head, but less. In 2020, the update was primarily to the free response section. This is what I think makes the test in some ways easier to prepare for than what people used to have, in that the free response section is very specific about how it will be structured. You have 2 long questions with very specific parts, 4 shorter questions with and each of those is predictable in terms of what it's going to ask you to do. So we'll take a look at those later so we can talk about exactly how that works. But I think that's incredibly valuable. The fact that that update was very recent means there's less material out there that is entirely up to date. You've really only got 2 years of material in the new format for the free response. But the good news is any like general content about what the exam covers like any multiple choice practice has been roughly the same since 2013. So there's a decent amount of material for the multiple choice section, and the free response questions from 2013 through 2020 are still going to give you an idea of kind of the conceptual difficulty of the writing and the types of tasks you're going to use. It's just that the exact format changed in 2020. You've probably seen something like this with the AP Bio store distribution before, but if you haven't, this is a scary number, right? Only about 7.4% of the people who took the exam in 2021 got a 5. This is a very challenging test. There's a lot to know, a lot to fit into this time. About 60% of people are passing the test, if you consider passing a 3 and up, which is what would be considered equivalent to passing a freshman biology course. But generally places are looking for you to get a 4 or a 5 to have it be considered an impressive score. But a 3 is an accomplishment in that you got like the core content down, but we want to help you get a 5. So let's keep going. All right, so we're going to talk about how you make a study plan, but first you should know kind of what you have to work with. The beginning things is your content from class. If your teacher is very organized and has been doing this a while, your material is going to be a little bit more useful than if your teacher's newer or wasn't great at explaining things to you this year. But that is one place you can start, is the class content. And it's going to be a very important tool for planning your studying. Additionally, there is AP Classroom, which is a site you have to have a sign-in for and that your teacher would have to give you access to. No one else can give you access to it, but an actual current AP bio teacher. And that has a number of practice materials on it. If you've used AP Classroom this year, as the year has gone on, great. If you haven't, it's something to ask your teacher about, because there's some things they can assign you there that I can't give you access to. No one at a prep company can give you direct access to, unless they teach 4-credit AP classes, which places generally don't. However, there's a lot of other material available. The general College Board website, not locked behind AP Classroom, is going to be your first option, and you absolutely need the material here. There are previous years free response questions from previous exams, going back almost as far as when I took it. As I said, you don't want anything that old. You want questions from 2013 and on, to 2021 here, 2021, but 2021, 2020 and 2021 are going to be your best material for the up-to-date FRQ format. But you'll have a lot more questions to practice if you use the older materials as well. And the full exam from 2013 is available. And that you can Google full AP biology exam practice, and that should be the first result that comes up. So you don't even have to dig through the College Board website to find it. But in addition to the exam materials, they publish extensive content guides to the course, which can be used to review material from early on in the course or from the course as a whole. They list out every single standard and piece of knowledge that they expect you to have going into this test. And that's incredibly valuable for knowing, what am I going to be tested on? What am I not going to be tested on? This should be incredibly clear. It's not a teacher who's not going to be straightforward about what's important. So I'm not going to show you that document because it is 232 pages long. The important stuff though is the unit guides, which are about 30 pages of that document. And those are going to go through kind of what each standard is. That's the most relevant to a student studying for the test. A lot of the materials in that huge course framework are for teachers knowing how to teach it. There's also some material on there about how the test is structured, but there's a lot of other places to get that. Second, which I would still consider almost the same as getting stuff directly from College Board, because Khan Academy and College Board work very closely together, is the Khan Academy AP Bio content. Their review materials are in both video and written form, and they have a small amount of multiple choice practice questions. Those questions are not attempting to be full multiple choice practice for the exam, but are more multiple choice review of individual sections of the test, but also a solid place to start. So you're absolutely going to need the College Board website. Khan Academy, up to you whether you find it useful or not. But then you are also going to need some practice tests to take. There are plenty of free response questions to take from College Board, and they're going to be the best because you're going to have complete scoring guides for explaining exactly how they want their answers written, and you're going to get them as close to the content expectations of the College Board as possible. However, there's not a lot of multiple choice question practice directly from College Board. There's that one 2013 exam, and then not a lot beyond that. You're going to want to do at least 2 full multiple choice practice sections, maybe more, maybe 3 or 4. And for that, you're going to need to go to either albert.io or a prep book. Albert.io is an online website that is extremely thorough and deep. It covers the full class worth of material, but it is a paid resource, and you'll pay $69 for 6 months of access, or $79 for 12 months of access. Some schools use it though, so if your school uses it, yay for you, you've already got access. So that's great. This very thorough blog post breakdown of the test and exactly what's on it, however, is more readable than the College Board website's version, and like some nicely formatted to make everything very clear. And that's freely available. You can find that without having a login for Albert.io. But Albert.io has both unit tests to help you review each major section of the course, specific content review quizzes, but most valuably, 3 full practice tests that they have written. So that is one good source of multiple choice practice. The other one to consider is prep books from the big companies. So that's things like Barron's, Princeton Review, etc. These, if you want them to be fully up to date, again, they need to be 2020 or later. However, the multiple choice is going to be pretty accurate from 2013 on. So prep books can even be pulled from a library. They often don't have the most current year, but you can get practice multiple choice that would still be, like I said, quite solid. And most of these prep books are like $20. So these are a pretty affordable option. Finally, a resource that some students overlook as a possibility is that if you enjoy playing quiz games for review, Quizlet, Kahoot, any of those, you can make a student account and you can make your own quizzes to help you review. Makes your review a little bit more interactive, makes it easy to do on your phone. And you don't have to make the quizzes entirely yourself. Teachers create quizzes that are freely available on these sites. So if you search AP Biology and then a content keyword, like AP Biology vocabulary or AP Biology cell membranes, you're going to find teacher and student generated review materials for you to use. I wouldn't recommend using them without like paging through them first and look if they look good. I would not consider any of them gospel, but they're very good to modify for your own use. You make a copy of any of them and add on to them. And it's a great way to have active review kind of generated partially for you. That's generally free, whereas an Albert.io you're going to pay for and is not going to be like flashcards to flip through if that's a way that you like studying. Now, making physical flashcards, also a great study activity. So not going to take that away from anyone. But if you like those quiz game sites, there's a lot of materials that other people have already made for you, and user reviews are going to be a guide to roughly what is accurate and valuable. Finally, if you are a video person, there is great content on YouTube. Specifically, I would recommend these channels, Bozeman Science, Lassiter's Lab, and the College Board's AP channel specifically. Bozeman Science was an award-winning AP Bio teachers channel. His content review is unmatched, which is why I think no one else has tried to replicate what he did. His lectures are pretty condensed and well illustrated. So while it's not the most entertaining thing in the world, it's pretty easy to focus on, and you're not going to have to watch an hour lecture to get an overview of a topic. They're usually 10 to 15 minutes. He has a few big review videos that are longer than that, but he generally keeps most of them a little bit more manageable. Think crash course, but not quite as fast, and a little bit more specific to the AP than you're going to get with a crash course video. So he's who I would recommend for content of individual kind of areas. College Board review playlists are by unit. So there's 8 videos for all of AP Bio. The videos are quite long, and they cover a lot. So they might be useful, but you have to know that you're getting a ton of material at once. Finally, Lassiter's Lab. Miss Lassiter is a current AP Bio teacher. So she's giving you much more up-to-date information about the test specifically, and how to study and how to write great answers to questions. So if you need guides to kind of the nitty-gritty of how to take the test, and you're not working with a tutor, this is the person I would tell you to go to for advice. She knows the test very well, and the videos are well produced. Finally, I put this here largely so we can talk about it, the student review videos. These videos can be useful. Some students make incredible content and are sometimes better at it than their teachers are. However, typically students are limited by having just their point of view, and they're going to tell you how they studied, which is not necessarily going to be the best method of studying for you. You need to know yourself, know what you're strong at, know what you're weak at, know what works for you, and exactly copying someone else's method is not it. Any very specific advice that is very prescriptive of you have to study exactly this way, I would take with a huge grain of salt. And also, please be aware of the dates on student review videos. Again, if it's older than 2020, it's not the most recent version of the test that they're talking about. And if it's older than 2013, it's absolute trash. So throw it away. All right, so now we get to how to do this. How exactly are you going to study for this test? Now, the test, as we talked about, was May 12th. So we have the rest of March is about a week. And in that time, I want you to be figuring out your study plan. So you're going to gather and organize those materials that I just talked about. You're going to figure out if you're buying a book and you're going to order it on Amazon. You're going to, if you're not buying a book, you're going to sign up for a site like Albert that is going to give you a lot of practice materials and practice exams equivalent to what you would get in a book. You're going to see what you have access to on AP Classroom and ask your teacher about it if you've never used AP Classroom, and ask if they can give you access. And you're also going to go back through your old exams and say, what have I done well on? What have I struggled with? You can use what you actually got wrong as an answer, as a guide to that, but also like, what do I feel I remember well, and what could I explain to a friend right now? And you can go through the big topics and what's on there, and use that to be like, which of these could I talk about and like write a mini essay on right now? And what of these do I only kind of remember? That's going to tell you where you're going to need to spend more of your time for prep. You shouldn't prep for all of the units equally. Some of them you just did. Some of them you did months ago. Some of them you've seen the content from 3 times, because learning about hydrogen bonding and water, you saw it in intro chem and you saw it in intro bio, and you got it. And some of it is much more complicated. Some of the mathier, the deeper math about natural selection, maybe you've only done it on 1 test and you didn't do great on it. That you need to allot more time for. I need you to be really realistic about your time when you plan the studying. You want to plan a study plan that you can actually commit to and follow through on, not an ideal world. If I had nothing else going on, if everything was great, if I was a perfect student, this is how I would study. It's not about just sheer amount of time, and a beautiful study plan that you don't follow is useless. Another thing that you need to account for now, that I think a lot of students don't remember to do, is when are you going to take practice exams? You might be lucky and have a teacher who's planned some study time into your course, so that you can do practice exams in class or one of them in class. Or your teacher's even just treating that class time like a study hall. If that's true, like awesome, use that time. But if you're going to need to take a practice on the exam on the weekend, you only have so many weekends between now and then. Some of them are probably used for other things. So you need to block out the time now. You need to make your parents aware of it if they're prone to scheduling things without talking to you. Because practice exam is 3 hours. And if you want to do a full one, that's a big chunk of time. And if you don't have it set aside, the weekends can really run away from you. But the most important thing I want to say here is that you want to plan specific active tasks. So rereading or just watching videos without actively doing anything this is not studying. This is how you initially take in material, but when we reread material alone, it often feels very good. Our brain recognizes some of the content, and that feels like it's a useful practice. But in order to recall something later, you need to practice the act of recalling it. So you need to be actively quizzing yourself, practicing writing about the content, and summarizing in your own words. And you need to be taking practice tests. So anything that's not active, that you don't have a pencil out or you're not answering questions, is not useful. When you take practice tests, you need to review missed answers, and not just like, right, got that wrong, whatever. How are you going to act on that information? Are you going to add that a new piece of information to a flashcard deck? Are you going to write a quiz related to that topic? How are you going to make sure that you don't miss that same thing next time? So this is what I want you planning in. Sure, if you want to plan, I want to sit and watch the Bozeman video on this topic that I felt like I didn't understand. That's one task that can be in there, but then there should be something after that. How are you going to quiz yourself on that content? Are you going to do the chapter test in your prep book or on Albert? Those are things that you need to plan into. If you're only planning, I'm going to review this content, and you don't have tasks, it's going to be a lot easier to just not do it. That's another reason that you want specific things on your study guide, not just content, but what materials you're going to use to review that content, because then you just execute every day. You don't have to have the brain power to plan. You just go, okay, today I'm taking these Albert practice quizzes, and then reviewing my missed answers. Or today I'm watching this video before I take some practice tests. Or today I am making a Kahoot based on Unit 1, etc. From April 1st through April 30th, what you are doing is this full content review. These are the units from AP Bio. You have chemistry of life, cell structure and function, cellular energetics, cell communication and cell cycle, heredity, gene expression and regulation, natural selection, and ecology. You'll notice these are not all equally distributed on the test. Some of them are covered in less detail than others. That doesn't mean they're not important, but it does mean that some of them are, like, if you mostly got them, you probably don't need to devote a huge chunk of your studying time to. A big thing to note is that natural selection can be up to 20% of the test. And the key for that is that it's the idea of evolution is one of 4 big ideas in the course. And if you don't understand natural selection, you don't understand evolution. So if a quarter of the big ideas in the course relate to evolution, of course, natural selection as a unit has to be very important to the course. However, there's other units that also address evolution to some extent. So heredity is going to discuss evolution a little bit. You talk about it in cell structure and function when you talk about where mitochondria and chloroplasts come from. So it's sprinkled through many of the units. But if you don't understand natural selection, you can't connect any of that to the idea of evolution. So you have to be very, very clear on evolution. Energetics is about this idea of how biological systems use energy. Information is about how biological systems transmit information. So how heredity works, how DNA and RNA work. So from the molecular level to kind of the big conceptual level, and Punnett squares and all of that, that's information. And then systems is about how we can have complex interactions between all these different levels of organization and also between different organisms within an ecosystem, and those kind of network effects is this big idea systems. You should be connecting to these big ideas as you study as much as possible. How can I connect this to one of the big understandings is going to help you link ideas together in your head and make sure that you can talk about them in a more complex, deep way. So those big ideas written out, the way that the College Board says them is the process of evolution drives the diversity and unity of life for evolution. Energetics, biological systems use energy and molecular building blocks to grow, reproduce, and maintain dynamic homeostasis. Dynamic homeostasis or equilibrium, very important concepts and terms. If you don't know exactly what those are and you can't explain how they work in a cell or in an organism, get on that immediately. Huge idea, absolutely will be tested on it. Big idea 3, living systems store, retrieve, transmit, and respond to information essential to life processes. The big way we're talking about that is genetic information. That's what you spend the most time on in class. So that's how DNA works, how RNA works. But information storage and transmission also happens in non-heritable ways. That's information about the environment, that's sensing the environment through things like a nervous system or at a cellular level, things in the cell membrane. Proteins in the cell membrane. So any information that an organism is getting about its environment or transmitting through a population would also be information storage and transmission. But what you've spent the most time on, because this is not a neuro class or really a behavior class, is the genetic information that's being passed on. Finally, systems interactions is biological systems interact, and these systems and their interactions exhibit complex properties. So being able to explain how one organism in a food web being impacted is going to affect all the other things in that food web, or could theoretically affect the things in that food web, that would be one way of demonstrating understanding of systems interactions. There's also understanding how the effect on one part of a biochemical pathway is going to affect other aspects of the pathway. So being able to do that kind of systems analysis is absolutely going to be on the test. It's either going to be a big part of some multiple choice, or it's going to be, most likely it will affect at least one of the FRQ questions. There's 4 big ideas, there's 6 FRQs. You should expect each of these big ideas to be hit in the FRQs. Finally, as I said before, we should have practice tests being taken in the course of your studying. You can take a practice test as soon as you feel that it would be useful to you. If you feel like you did pretty well this year and you want to just jump in and take one now to get a sense of, okay, where am I weak? What do I need to study for? Great. If you feel like, I don't remember any of the units from the beginning of the year at all, I need to at least do a quick refresher before I take a practice test, you know yourself, do that. But I want you to plan at least one practice exam between May 1st. It should not be May 31st, between May 1st and test day, which is less than 2 weeks for the record. You could also do that at the very end of April, depending on how those weekends fall. You may not have the first weekend in May. I would recommend it, but if not, then you might have to switch this into the last bit of April. But I would say at least 2 practice exams over the course of your studying. Ideally, I do at least 3 full multiple choice sections, and I would take and I would use the FRQs to study. Now, in using those FRQs, I should tell you a few things. Now this is the 2021 FRQs. As I said, this exact format is what you will see on the test. So the long questions are quite long, and any of the FRQs and any of the multiple choice questions can introduce new information, new topics. You need to get used to doing the the College Board FRQs, because they are better at introducing this outside new information and these complex scenarios than almost any third-party materials are. So they're going to throw new vocabulary at you, specific hormones, specific diseases that you probably didn't study. No one's expecting you to know those things. They're expecting you to use what you do know about plasma membranes and transporters across the membranes, about signal transduction pathways, about protein kinases, and about how to read a graph to be able to answer the questions given on these. This is a drawing of a specific signaling pathway. You may have never seen this pathway before. You should be familiar with signal transduction pathways and be able to interpret this and make sense of it. Going through and answering these, and then evaluating your answers against the actual scoring guidelines is the best way to practice the FRQs. If you have a friend who's also studying for this test, who's also working very hard at it, they might be able to, you could maybe trade and grade each other's. If you're not sure whether your answer was right, you might be able to ask your teacher as well, though obviously they've got a lot of students. The answer keys are very detailed in explaining what they need. And for 2021 specifically, we have even more than that. We have the Chief Reader Report, which goes through and gives you literal quoted examples of responses that demonstrated understanding and misconceptions that students often had. So you can check, did you have any of those misconceptions in your answer? If so, then you did not get those points. Did your answer sound pretty close to the demonstrating understanding one? Then they probably would have given you those points. So this is an incredibly time-consuming activity, not just doing the FRQ, but analyzing your answers and trying to see, would I have gotten those points? Did I say all those things? But it's one of the most valuable ways to study is to actually do it. And you should do at least one of these full FRQ sections 4 times. An hour and a half is what you have. You have 90 minutes for these questions. You want to be prepared for how you're going to split up your time on those. Officially, the first 10 minutes is a reading period, which means you are not, you're supposed to be just reading and kind of outlining, not officially writing, but that is not enforced. You can start writing the second they hand you the exam, but I would expect you to take at least a few minutes of that reading time to go look at all the questions and figure out how you're going to attack them one at a time. Some students like to do the easiest ones first. I think this is a great idea. Get the points that you know you're going to get that are fast to get, and then move on to hard ones. But if you're like, I know all the stuff, but I mostly need to, I'm worried about time, you could do the hard ones first. So it's really up to you and what's going to feel the best. You should be spending about 20 minutes per long question and 10 to 15 minutes on the shorter questions. But obviously that's going to depend on you. You should also note that you're going to be writing everything for the FRQs in pen. So you want to, for the ones that require drawing or a graph, if that makes you nervous, you can draw it in pencil first and then trace over it. But they will not grade anything in pencil. So it's very important that you get that. However, this is a lot to study for. This may not even be your only AP. You've got a lot on your plate. So I want to address that you should prioritize your rest and mental health, and not just spending huge numbers of hours studying. Short focus sessions where you get tasks done are much better than reading or watching videos for hours and hours and hours. You're not going to retain as much from that as you would from an hour or 2 hours of focused, active work. And that spread out over time is much more effective than those huge study sessions, which is why you need to start now. Secondly, I know that I would not have listened to this when I was your age, and you are probably going to lose some sleep to studying. However, you do not want to stay up all night. In the week before test day, that sleep debt will be affecting you still. You don't want to be regularly staying up late studying, because it's also not going to, you need to have the REM sleep in order to fully move to long-term memory, the stuff that you've worked on. So if you are getting like less than 2 hours of sleep, or some people less than 4 hours, you're not going to ever get there. And so your studying is going to be for nothing, or for a lot less effective than it could have been. Finally, exam day packing list. You need your number 2 pencils. You need pens with black or dark blue ink. Have several of them in case they run out. Check them before you pack them. Have your pencils sharp, or have a mechanical pencil or several mechanical pencils. I have had pencils break during these tests and then been forced to use a stubby little nothing. It's not a fun time. A non-smartwatch that does not beep or make noise. Those are hard to come by these days, but they are required to have a clock in the room for these tests. It's not always easily visible. So you're going to want to watch if at all possible. For calculators, you're going to want 4-function, you're allowed a 4-function calculator, but you want a scientific calculator. The biology test includes math, and there's review on all those math. You are given all the formulas you need, but some of those formulas include square roots. A 4-function calculator typically does not do that. So you're going to need at minimum a scientific calculator. Graphing calculators are also allowed, as long as it doesn't have a keyboard, stylus, camera, or touchscreen, have wireless of any kind, so Bluetooth, internet access. Nope. It can't plug in and it can't make noise. So if you want to be very thorough, you go onto the College Board website and you can check the exact model of calculator to know that it's improved. But basically, if you have a scientific calculator, no one's going to really look twice at it. If you have a graphing calculator, as long as it looks like a pretty standard model and not like you're making noise and or typing on a keyboard, you're probably going to be okay. But absolutely do not forget that calculator. You will be sad. You won't be able to do your Hardy-Weinbergs and equations, or your chi-squared analysis, and you're going to have a hard time. And multiple pencils, multiple pens. Okay, so I got through a lot of content today. I left some time to answer questions, but I don't see any right now. So if anyone has any questions, you can pop them into Q&A. In the meantime, I wanted to note one other thing, is that all of the FRQs use the same task verbs across all the all the AP science exams, and they're being very precise in terms of what they want you to do when they use these words. You should know every single one of these, and for the AP biology exam, they will use the same task words on question 1 every time, the same task verbs on question 2 every time. You can look at how the 2021 exam is formatted and expect to see those same tasks shown again. So sketch or plot is going to tell you you need to be drawing. You need to draw a illustration. State or indicate is telling us something about a specific topic without explanation. Be very specific about that. If they're asking you to just tell them something, don't explain, just tell them and move on. label means you are marking up a diagram that they gave you or labeling a graph that you drew. When you see the word justify, you should think about those claim as evidence reasoning paragraphs that you've hopefully written in a science class before. However, you do not need to write the full formal paragraph. Your justification and your claim evidence reasoning could be 2 sentences, but you need to state the claim, you need to state the evidence, and you need to draw a clear connection between the two when they ask for you to justify. Derive is not likely to show up on the AP Bio exam. That's asking you to find something from equations or laws to arrive at a final answer. But verify and the rest of these all could show up on there. Calculate will absolutely show up on there. Explain and describe will absolutely show up on the test. Compare will absolutely show up on the test. So these are things you should be prepared to know exactly what they're asking you to do. And again, you have a great example of that with the 2021 FRQ. You have example answers in the biology test. Finally, hopefully you've been told this before, but outlines and bullet points are not sufficient. You need to write in full sentences. However, you do not need to write an essay. You can have a part A and just write 2 sentences that do the job of describing and explaining, and you're done. There does not have to be one coherent essay that links all of these things and is a beautiful piece of writing. Your job is to execute all the tasks that you are told to do. Okay, so I think we're going to wrap there since I'm still not seeing any questions coming in. This has been lovely. I hope this was helpful for some of you, and good luck on your AP Bio exam.